I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The little coffee shop near the office, quiet, with cracked paint on the windowsill, had become my second home. Not because I loved the place, exactly, but because it was the only corner where I could slip away without too many questions. I'd come here every morning, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, no sugar. The barista knew. The woman behind the counter knew too. She was my boss. 40-something, sharp edges softened by the way her sleeves were always rolled up just so, like she was ready to dive into 100 different problems all at once. Her voice was low, controlled, never quite letting on how much she noticed. "Don't make me repeat myself," she said today as I handed over the empty cup for a refill, eyes flicking to the clock behind me. The words were firm, but there was a softness under it, like she wasn't really scolding me, just trying to hold a space where things could be clear. I looked up, caught her glance just as it slipped away. "Then whisper it," I muttered back, almost under my breath. My voice cracked a little on the last word. She didn't laugh or scold, just raised an eyebrow and kept folding napkins with slow hands. That small exchange wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to anchor me here. I folded the corner of my napkin with nervous fingers and glanced at her again, catching her watching me for a second longer than necessary. I tried to read something in her eyes, maybe a crack in her usual calm, but all I saw was the faint crease of tiredness around her lips. She rubbed at her temple, a gesture I remembered from 1,000 Zoom calls, from 1,000 deadlines I was too scared to meet. Most days, I swallowed words before they even formed. I never knew if I was interrupting or just filling awkward silence. Today, though, I felt that small pulse of something unspoken between us, like a half-remembered song that's soft but persistent. There was a lull in the morning rush, the coffee machine's hum filling the quiet. Outside, a stray breeze shuffled leaves along the cracked sidewalk. I took out my phone, thumb hovering over a message I never sent. It was just 2 words. Simple. Stupid, even. She didn't need to know. I tucked the phone away and leaned back in my chair, watching her pull a stray strand of hair behind her ear, careful not to disturb the loose bun she favored. She had a way of moving that was both exact and effortless, as if she measured everything but let nothing weigh her down. I wondered if she ever felt the same, if she noticed the way my eyes lingered longer than necessary, or how I hesitated when she asked if I wanted a refill. The quiet between us wasn't empty. It was full of small things. The way her voice softened when she spoke to the older lady at the next table. The way she traced invisible patterns on the counter when she thought no one was looking. The way she kept a thermos tucked under her desk, even though the coffee was always fresh here. As I stood to leave, she caught my sleeve gently. Not enough to stop me, just a touch that made me pause. Her voice was softer this time. "You forgot your notebook." I smiled, a little crooked and unsure. "Thanks." I didn't know if I was supposed to say more, but something about the way she looked at me made me want to. Instead, I packed up my things slowly, feeling the weight of 1,000 unsaid words in my chest. Outside, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Meet me after work. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, heart a little off rhythm. Talk? What kind of talk? I folded my napkin again, this time deliberately, and slipped the phone back in my pocket. Maybe she meant more than just coffee refills. Maybe this was the beginning of something neither of us knew how to say out loud. The office was quieter than usual when I showed up after work. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was steady, almost comforting, but the air felt heavier, thick with something unsaid. She was already there, sitting behind her desk, a half-empty mug of tea cooling beside her. The steam had long since faded, but she'd left it untouched. I hesitated by the door, then stepped in. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, eyes not quite meeting mine. There was a pause, like she was weighing whether to keep the usual guard up or let something through. I thought maybe we should talk. Not about work." Her voice cracked just a little. The surprise was that it wasn't cold or clinical. It was real. I pulled out a chair, sitting across from her, noticing the faint scent of jasmine tea mixing with the old paper smell of her office. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she looked up, and the hesitation gave way. "My ex," He left when my daughter was 10. Not a drama, just quiet disappearance. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the mug. She's grown now, but sometimes I still feel like I'm piecing things together alone. I wanted to say something that made it better, but all I could do was nod, swallowing a sudden tightness in my chest. I don't usually share that. Her voice was almost a whisper. But you don't flinch when things get complicated. I glanced down at my hands, feeling suddenly smaller. There was a lot about her I didn't know, about us, too. The gap between my 20-something uncertainty and her mid-40s steadiness was a line neither of us could ignore. The fact that her daughter was a friend of mine, someone I'd joked with just last week, made the whole thing feel like walking on cracked glass. In my mind, scenes played out like shadows. What if this all ended badly? What if it shattered more than just me? She caught my gaze and gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. I'm not sure if this is a good idea, or a bad one. Maybe it's neither, I said, voice low. Maybe it's just this. We sat in silence, the clock ticking somewhere between us. I reached over, quietly handing her the tea. Our fingers brushed, brief but weighted, like a promise neither of us dared say aloud. She held my eyes a moment longer, then looked away, cheeks faintly flushed. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next morning, the coffee shop felt different. The usual hum was there, but the space between us had shifted, taut like a string about to snap. She was behind the counter again, but her eyes flicked away the moment I walked in, busying herself with wiping down the espresso machine. I ordered my usual without looking up. For a second, I thought maybe last night had been some kind of mistake, or a moment she wanted to forget. I lingered near the counter, watching her fold a small cloth with slow, deliberate hands. Her fingers trembled just a little. Busy day? I asked, voice softer than I intended. She paused, then smiled. Too quick, too forced. Always. The door swung open, and one of my co-workers stepped inside, waving at her with a familiar grin. They exchanged a few words about a meeting, the sound washing over us, breaking the fragile bubble we'd built. She glanced at me briefly, then looked away. My heart caught in that moment, not because she ignored me, but because I wasn't sure if she wanted me to notice. Later, in the office, our routines felt tangled. I caught her watching me over the rim of her glasses, eyes searching for something she wouldn't name. When I moved to pass her a stack of papers, our fingers brushed, light, accidental, but enough to send a jolt through my chest. She pulled back, folding her arms as if to create distance. I wanted to ask if it was me, if I'd done something wrong, but the words got stuck. During a lull, I found her alone in the break room, stirring her tea with slow, measured movements. The silence between us stretched long and brittle. I don't know what you want, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. And maybe I'm not ready to find out. I swallowed hard. The truth was, I wasn't sure either. The clock ticked loudly, marking seconds filled with everything unsaid. I stepped closer, almost too close. She looked up, breath hitching. Our eyes met. No promises, no demands, just a fragile, unfinished question. I leaned in, the space shrinking, until the buzzer of the elevator downstairs jolted us apart. She blinked, steadying herself. Work? She murmured, almost apologetic. I nodded, heart pounding in the silence she left behind. We ended up outside, the evening air cool against my skin. The city buzzed faintly behind us, but here, on this narrow bench tucked between the low brick walls of the alley, it was quiet. Just the two of us, and the slow slide of time. She didn't say much at first, tracing a finger absent-mindedly along the edge of the wood. I watched the way her hands stayed still for a moment, then twitched, like she was holding back something heavy. I saw you with her today, she said finally. No anger, no accusation, just a voice fragile enough to break. The girl from the cafe. Your friend. My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how much I tried to keep those two worlds separate, her world and mine. I didn't mean for it to look like anything, I said, voice low. It's complicated. She laughed softly, but it wasn't a joke. Complicated is, you're young. And I'm not the kind of story people tell aloud. Her eyes met mine, unflinching. I'm scared. Scared of losing control. scared that I'm just a moment you'll outgrow. The words hung between us, raw and tender like a wound that didn't want to heal. I'm scared too, I admitted, the quiet spilling out in a rush I didn't stop. That this, whatever this is, could ruin more than I'm ready to risk. She nodded, the weight of it settling around us like dusk. A pause stretched long. Then, she shifted closer, and I could feel the heat of her breath, the steady pulse of her heart through the thin fabric of her sleeve. I don't want to be your secret, she whispered. But maybe I already am. My fingers twitched, reaching out but not quite touching. The moment trembled on the edge, fragile and electric. And then, her eyes searched mine, asking something I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. What now? She stopped coming to the coffee shop. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow fading out. One morning, I walked in and she wasn't there. Then the next day, and the day after that. The barista shrugged when I asked, said she was caught up with something. No details, just a quiet excuse. I found myself standing by the counter, waiting for a sign, a glance, anything. But the space she left behind felt heavier than any silence we'd ever shared. I tried to reach out. A text, half-written, then erased. Another message drafted, then deleted. What was I even supposed to say? That I missed her? That the empty chair by the window was unbearable? Then I heard, through a careful word from a coworker, that she'd been seeing her daughter more these days. That her ex had reached out after years of silence. Something about trying to mend what was broken. It explained the absence, but didn't ease the ache. Some nights, I imagined her sitting alone, hands wrapped around a warm cup, thinking of me in a way I didn't know how to reach. Other times, I wondered if I'd been nothing more than a quiet distraction, a page in a story she was ready to close. I wanted to knock on her door to break the pause. But my feet stayed frozen, the unsent messages piling up like unread letters. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. She was standing by her apartment door when I found the courage to come over. The street was empty, the soft hum of distant traffic wrapping around us like a quiet audience. Neither of us said anything at first. I shifted my weight, hands buried deep in my pockets, trying to figure out what words could even begin to fit the space between us. I've been thinking, she said finally, voice low but steady. About all this. About us. I nodded, not trusting my own voice yet. I don't want to pretend it's simple, she added, eyes tracing the cracks in the sidewalk. It's messy, and maybe it's not what either of us expected. A pause. The kind that stretches longer than it should, holding everything fragile inside it. I'm scared, she confessed, almost whispering now. Scared that we're too different, or that it's too late. I looked at her then, really looked. Saw the weight she carried. Not just the years between us, but the quiet battles, the things unsaid. I'm scared too, I admitted. But maybe that's why it matters. Her lips curved into a small, tired smile. She reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from my forehead. A gesture so simple it nearly broke something open. Okay, she said. Not a promise, not a vow. Just a word that held space for whatever came next. And that was enough. 8:47 a.m. The coffee was black, exactly as I'd ordered, and the bench outside the little shop was still a little cold, but she was already there, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. Same bench where we'd sat that night, the one that held more silence than words. She smiled when I joined her, the quiet kind of smile that didn't need explaining. Our mornings had settled into this. No grand gestures, no declarations, just two people who'd learned to be seen without needing to be fixed. Her fingers brushed against mine as she passed me the sugar packet, that tiny touch carrying everything we'd never said out loud. The city moved around us, busy and relentless, but here it was softer. Messy in the way real life is, no fairy tale endings, just the kind you earn by showing up, again and again. I thought about the first time she told me not to make her repeat herself, how I'd whispered back without knowing how much that small moment would hold. She looked over, catching me lost in thought. Still thinking about that? I nodded. Yeah, it's funny how something so simple felt like everything. She laughed softly, and the sound filled the space between us like a quiet promise. I didn't need to say more. We both knew this wasn't about perfection. It was about the warmth in the little routines we'd built, the stolen glances, the shared silences, the black coffee and the jasmine tea, the bench that never got too cold. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes love isn't the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes it's just the quiet presence beside you, steady and real. And that, I think, is what we'd finally found.